President Trump heading to Beijing with a full plate of issues up for discussion, including Iran, the AI race, tariffs, Taiwan, and critical minerals, to name a few. National Economic Council Director Kevin Hassett has high hopes for the talks, and he expects the deal-maker-in-chief to come away with some wins.
We're going to have this trip with two leaders that are extremely close with one another, and we're going to be making deals. Exactly how those deals look, it will depend on how the meetings progress. But my expectation, given the strong relationship between the two presidents, is that there'll be lots of good news for American workers and firms.
Marcus, you're one of the best deal makers I know. They're talking deals with China. Do you want to see a lot of deals here, or would you feel better if it was a much more cautious meeting?
We talked about this earlier. I did with Taylor, talking about transparency and consistency. I think that Taiwan part's going to be a big linchpin in this whole matter here, because ultimately China sees Taiwan as it's part of its country. We know how much semiconductor activity happens there on the island. The U.S. has always been a little skirtish about how they feel about Taiwan, and I think China is going to be looking, as part of this whole negotiation, to say, we need you to oppose.
Yes. Not
be okay with it. We need you to oppose. I worry that we give on that issue this time. I worry that Trump gives.
What worries you most about giving on that issue? There's a lot of different reasons you could worry about that. I'm curious for you why it makes you.
I wouldn't want to see China see that as a license to invade.
Okay.
I wouldn't want to see that China think that's a license to sort of do things that have not happened in the past. And I worry about the flow of semiconductors. If there's, does China actually take control of it and all of a sudden start to constrict the supply of that? And does it affect the rest of the market?
Taylor, you want to talk about Taiwan, I know, as well. And there are economic reasons to be concerned about that. There are obviously just broader geopolitical reasons. Okay. Yeah. Is that the biggest issue for you? That's why I asked Marcus, do you want to go in deal making, or is a win coming out of this thing having not given up anything to China?
Well, my concern, and we talked about this on quarterly reporting versus companies reporting every 6 months, and how China consistently takes the long view, and we get in this hurry up. I don't have an appetite to sustain anything longer than a couple months. And so I view that long game the way that we view the conflict in Iran. And Trump said, we're 9,500 miles from Taiwan and China is 67. It's a little bit of a difference there, but there's a lot of support for Taiwan from Japan and other countries in the area. And I think what worries me is you have Americans who are hurry up and get Iran over, and an unwillingness to see things through. And I'm not, again, saying it's wrong that we're in Iran, or that we should be trying to speed things up. Of course, we should have pressure and be trying to speed things up in Iran. But there is sort of this overall unwillingness of Americans to see things through for the long run because gas prices are going up, or because it's hurting the economy. And those feelings are real, but I get worried that China looks at that and then can say, I can do the same thing with Taiwan, because the Americans don't have an appetite to see things through for the long run. So we could go into Taiwan, and we know that Americans will give up after 6 months, the way that they gave up on Ukraine or the way they gave up on Iran. I don't know. So I think I think about China watching us in Iran right now, and hopefully not extrapolating anything that they'd want to do in the region. That leads to my second point, where he says, Taiwan is a lot of support from Japan and other countries in that region. And I mentioned this before. I think this sort of post-World War II pacifism that Germany's taken, that Japan has taken, I think part of that needs to end. Because I think Germany's, we've seen with Iran, Japan with Taiwan, they realize that they do need to start to step up to the plate, because we as Americans can't do it all.
Dagan, I was kind of surprised by how many companies are going to be coming with on this trip to China. I'm looking at the reported list here. It's almost A to Z. You got Apple at the top, BlackRock, Blackstone, Boeing, Cargill. You get to the bottom, you got Micron, Qualcomm, Tesla, Visa. There's a lot of folks, and there's a bunch in between there. There you go. You got the list right there on the screen. Does that make you feel good about the way we're structuring the meeting, or does that give you pause for concern?
If there's some reciprocity for U.S. companies doing business in communist China, because there has never really been reciprocity, that China has been able to do business here and not the other way around, not vice versa. The biggest issue from a business perspective will be clearly artificial intelligence, but they will, Beijing, Xi Jinping will talk a big game about the guardrails and the safety, and we will do nothing and they will like it. We're not gonna agree, this is just my opinion, but we're not gonna agree to hamstring American companies because they're going to tell us, communist China, what a threat it is. Also, are we going to give up any of our technology to Beijing? Are we going to open up chip exports to Beijing, AI technology exports to Beijing? No and no. Let's hope from on high that that happens. The Wall Street Journal editorial page notes that we're leading, and we should continue to lead, and we should do everything in the U.S. to do that, and that means icing out China. That the latest U.S. frontier models are reinforcing the case for withholding the AI building blocks from an adversary. And Congress has already warned President Trump that his political runway is short by moving on bills to tighten advanced chip exports. So we'll see what comes out of this. But, you know, if their lips are moving, they're lying. I'm talking about China, not politicians.
Dagan reminded me of one of my favorite lines from a movie, Judge Schmales telling Spaulding, "You'll get nothing and like it." Right. Okay? And sometimes I feel like that is the best you can hope for with China. You'll get nothing and you'll like it. But I wonder, with President Trump going over there, the risk to me seems lower. Remember when we used to say we're going to do a whole bunch of stuff on climate, and they said that, and then they didn't do anything on climate, and they built a lot of coal plants?
Right.
Like, that was the old way of doing things. I don't see President Trump making a commitment that they don't reciprocate on. But he does have this great relationship with Xi, and he likes those relationships. And sometimes I wonder if that creates, like, does she want to exploit that? Can she exploit that with Trump, do you think?
Look, you guys are all on the risk side on this. Pardon me for feeling like we're actually walking into this very, very strong. China's not in a good place right now. Watching what's happening in Iran, China's been very sheepish to a certain degree. Now, it's possible they might be aiding the Iranians because during Joe Biden's administration, all our sort of evil counterparts kind of became friends and started doing business together. And that is a huge problem that he created. But having said that, I feel like China's watching this and saying, you know, the American people, or the Democrats specifically here, may be complaining about higher gas prices. And I say higher because they're not the peak that we saw under Joe Biden. But President Trump in no way is giving up here. As a matter of fact, doing something that no president or many presidents have said they wanted to do or thought about doing, but I'm paraphrasing here, didn't necessarily have the courage to step up and do. This is something he is actually doing. And China's economy, despite the numbers they put out and all the sort of pomp and circumstance they try to play, is not in a good place. So I don't really think they have that much leverage. He's got to kind of go over there, maximize this relationship that he has with him, use that to his advantage. But I don't think they're going to make any kind of move on Taiwan right now, given all this turmoil, because I don't necessarily think they're in a position to do that. And the other issue we haven't brought up is the tariffs.
Right.
Maybe they can hammer something out on tariffs to resolve that part of the equation, especially at a time when gas prices are high and prices, you know, have been fluctuating in other areas as well. If you can iron out something with China on tariffs, that would be great to come back to the American people with.
I think Jackie's right about their economy not being in good shape, but it feels like a trip to show whose foot is bigger. Because in the past, natural resources around the globe have determined who the superpower was. And right now it feels like AI, infrastructure, semiconductor supply chain are starting. And when you show up with all those companies at the exact same time, you're saying, like, this is my team. What do you got?
Right.
And so I think there's a little bit of pressure there.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, I like that take. We got to leave it there, but we will follow.